Up the Connelly House! Up the Connelly House! Long live the James Connelly House! Up the freaking Connelly House! You know that man? That infracells sitting on their computers not doing real work praxis like we're doing at the Connelly House! Up the Connelly House! Up the Connelly House! Up the Connelly House! Up the freaking Connelly House! Long live the Connelly House! Alright, we're not going to spend a lot of time on theatrics today, guys, because I have a pretty... I don't know how long it's going to take, but I have a lecture lined up for you about... You know, I'm going to teach you something, right? So today, I didn't even want to do this shit. I didn't even want to have to cover it or focus any time on the Paul Moron shit. But, you know, I don't get to pick and choose when it happens, you know? Also, just want to let you guys know a few things before we get into today's content. And today's going to be a lecture in the similar style to the one we did about anarchism. And I genuinely want you to take something away from this and learn something from this one, right? So... few things. I'm going to just tell you how the stream is going to go. Well, actually, before I get into the stream, two things, right? Tomorrow, I need to visit my family. I haven't seen them in like 2 weeks. You know, if you guys remember last Saturday, which is usually when I visit family, I was debating Adam something. So there is not going to be a stream tomorrow. And I find that really regrettable. Because also, there's going to be some time next week where I'm going to get a haircut. I need to go get a haircut. I'll try to make time for streaming when I do that. But I just need to fucking cut my hair, right? So there's that. Tomorrow, there's not going to be a stream. And then I was going to do the Patreon podcast today. But there was only like 17 questions. And it wasn't particularly long. So I'm going to do one of two things, okay? I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to go ask your questions in the Patreon. Because I don't know if people just don't know where to ask the question or whatever, but there was just a lot less. Thanks for the gifted subs. All that is solid. Appreciate you, man. I don't know if that's the case. Another thing in regards to the Patreon is that I'm going to just do it Sunday, right? Because I did it last week. I did it Thursday. This week I do it Thursday. I'm just going to wait till Sunday to do it, just to get back on our regular schedule, because Sunday in general is a better day. So you guys are going to have until Sunday to ask your questions there. And if you don't, I'm going to like kind of have a really long substantive podcast to make up for it, right? If you don't ask more questions, I'm going to just give way more time to the ones that are asked.
Will you ever be able to afford a better camera?
Oh yeah, I'm going to buy a new camera. I just need to... Honestly, there's only been one thing that's been holding me back from buying a new camera. I just don't know which camera to buy. I genuinely don't know which camera I should get. That's... As soon as somebody recommends me a really good camera, I'll just go buy it, right? As long as it's not too expensive. But yeah, I can buy a camera. You know, I can really buy a camera whenever, especially after yesterday's stream. So I can definitely buy a camera, you know? I think I've asked Jackson before, but even he really doesn't know. So yeah, I every time I ask somebody, they just give me a conflicting answer. So, and also the problem is in the camera, it's the lighting. And I could turn on the light right now. It's just that I didn't shower today, so my hair is gonna look weird. If I turn on the light, it'll look really bad. So I'm just gonna keep the lighting off, and it'll be better for everybody, right? It'll be better for everybody. So those are the two things I wanted to get out of the way before I get into today's stream. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to do for today's stream, right? So today, there's probably 3 parts of today's stream. If we're lucky, right? First part, we're going to cover the Connelly House. What's going on with the Connelly House. The second part, I'm going to be giving you this lecture.
Canon EOS M50 Plus webcam setup package.
I will check that out. I'll check that out. We're going to cover the Connelly House. We're going to get into that fun stuff, and also some surprising, interesting details from that whole thing. I don't know if you guys know about, right? Then we're going to talk about today's lecture, which I wanted to do a few days ago. I was just too tired to do it, and I didn't get any sleep. I got like 9-10 hours of sleep last night, so I am fully mentally capable of giving this lecture today. I can give this lecture today, and it's going to be all good, right? So, and then second of all...
Your current camera is definitely communist tech.
Okay. So, and then third, we're going to do more GTRP at the very end, if we have time, right? At the very end. Or I might just let you guys vote. Either we do Twitter Space debates, which I don't know if that's going to be that fun. Or we could just do more GTRP. Because I'm going to still repay you guys, you know, for yesterday. You know, I just want to do more. So that's that. So before we get into the whatever, I'm going to blow my nose. Be right back. I'm going to begin this by taking us to the origin of this whole thing. So, the Connelly House. So, this is not the origin, but it's part of the origin, right? So, if you don't remember, a few weeks ago, I'm going to just get you guys up to speed. A few weeks ago, Paul Moron, the guy who's claiming that Russia's imperialist and that we're campus and all this kind of shit, right? He made a comment claiming that infracells don't do any real-life organizing and they don't do any real-life praxis, such as the one that he was involved in and that his friends are involved in, which is called the Connelly House. So he went out of his way to do that. And then I challenged him to a debate after that about this Connelly House, and this is what Paul had to say. So, this is what Paul Moran had to say. Okay? Yo, Infrahaz, I'll never debate your fascist incel ass. You're only worth mentioning to hook people's attention and then divert that attention away from your reactionary debate bro bullshit towards genuine revolutionary action happening IRL. Up the James Connelly House! And look at this, is so beautiful. 600 lights. I mean, it's so beautiful, right? But we uncovered some interesting things about the Connelly House. Some pretty funny things, actually, which was basically that the building was earmarked for Ukrainian refugees. And this Maoist group, I don't know who it is, Paul Moran's group, I guess, they pretty much just took it over and occupied the building, squatting in it, right? So let me tell you what the Connelly House basically is. It's a random house, it's a random building in Dublin that some Maoists decided they're going to go occupy because it's a seemingly vacant, right? To make some public statement about the crisis of homelessness within Ireland. So they did that. And then they decided to come at me and come at Infrared and hold up this type of direct action praxis as an example of people in the real world doing real things. In comparison to us, we don't do anything important, anything real. We're just on the computer and on the internet. Now, honestly, I don't really take myself too seriously, believe it or not. At the end of the day, I do think there is something inherently ridiculous about this box I'm in, right? And I do understand that I'm literally just a guy on the internet. But with that being said, I do believe in what I'm doing, right? Even if I don't take myself that seriously, in the sense of like, I don't think what I'm doing makes me some revolutionary or makes me some kind of communist leader. I'm not at that level, but I do believe in what I'm doing in the sense of the message that I'm getting out there, right? So that is something I really do believe in. I believe in it so much that I've decided to dedicate my whole life to it, right? So, but if you want to use this and uphold this as an example of what we should be doing today, and the principal example of socialist praxis and doing things in the real world in contrast to what you're doing, I mean, put it this way. Let's just say I accept that you're correct. I'm just a guy who's sitting here, sitting on my ass, streaming, not doing any real world praxis, not contributing anything, whatever. I'm just a loser guy streaming, right? Okay. So your job is to convince me to go get up out of my ass, wake up in the morning and go do this type of shit, right? And that's how I'll become a true socialist. So the question I have to impose is, what are you actually accomplishing by doing this shit? What are you accomplishing? Where is this taking you? What is the point of doing it? Is this better than doing nothing, right? For example, they keep trying to say, well, it's better than nothing. Why? Why is it better than nothing? What? Because if it's better than nothing, that means it's going to accomplish something.
Here's 3 shekels for the camera. Upgrade that MF.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'll upgrade it. Don't worry about it. That just means that you're doing something, right? Supposedly important. What? Where? Why is it better than doing nothing? I don't get it, right? You have to look at that at the level of the results, because if it's better than doing nothing, that means that the result that it's producing is better than doing nothing, which is nothing, the result being nothing. But I'm actually going to give them some credit, because the result isn't nothing, it's worse than nothing. So let me actually show you the result of their actions. And by the way, before I do, I just want to tell you what I said at the time. I said this, okay? The Connelly House is fucking stupid. It's a stupid form of adventurism. It's the Irish Chaz, because the only way such an action would ever take off is if it somehow sparks a movement within Ireland that's going to convince, thousands and thousands and thousands of people to get on the street. And if you're going to break the law, if you're going to take an action to break the law of your country, the only thing that can save you from the law and the wrath of the state is popular support, right? So what I said is that in Ireland right now, you're not going to get enough popular support to prevent the force of the law coming down on you, because not enough people know who you are. They don't know about your cause. They're not invested in your cause. You're not providing them any kind of political solution for the seizure of power. You're not doing anything like that, right? You're not winning over the Irish masses. The Irish masses are not disposed or won over to you. I literally tried to argue this and say this. I mean, look, forget about all the insults and all the mockery and all that stuff that I was engaged in. I'm a plain-spoken American. I don't just like to mock people. I tried to tell you that the Irish masses are not behind you as far as taking illegal actions are concerned. You can only start taking illegal actions in the following circumstances: when the state is no longer legitimate in the eyes of the masses. When, for example, you're on the cusp of some kind of revolution in which a new form of the law is going to replace the old one. I mean, these are when illegal actions, might have some merit. But otherwise, you're going to go out and do illegal shit in broad public view, knowing you're going to get caught. I mean, the only result of that is that the police are going to get you, you're going to go to fucking jail and go to court, and you're going to go on Twitter and bitch and cry about it like I literally fucking predicted you would. Why? We all saw this coming. I literally said this. I literally said, when the police come and take them out of that fucking house, they're going to act like they're such victims, and they're going to expect the Irish masses to come out in droves to support them. It's not going to fucking happen. Play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. You do stupid illegal shit, the police are going to come. And it's very simple. Ireland is a country of laws. You could say those laws are hypocritical, false, and wrong, and illegitimate in your head. But functionally speaking, by the way, this has a lot to do with the theory stream that we're going to get into and get engaged with. practically speaking, those laws matter. That is how the state legitimizes itself and legitimizes itself in the eyes of the masses in addition to itself. So it's like the state cares about the consistency of laws. The masses care about the consistency of laws. So you could say, oh, bollocks the law, bollocks the law, I'm just going to steal this house. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I could literally, like, we told you this was going to happen. And you kept bragging in our faces that you're doing real world revolutionary praxis. We told you what was going to fucking happen, which is just that you're going to get arrested. And you're going to make it seem like it's a big surprise and it's some big outrage and outcry that you got arrested. I mean, like, this would be akin to going to the jungle and pinching a lion's ass. And then when the lion rips your head off, you start, like, throwing a big fit in public, expecting, oh, bring the lion to justice. No, because what you did was very predictable. Hawes is defending the lion. It doesn't matter what you and I think is legitimate or not. This is like patently predictable shit. It's just like a lion in the jungle. Like, you could easily see this coming. What did you think was going to happen? Guys, I don't understand this. If you go to a police station and slap a police officer in the face and he puts cuffs on you, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Why are you protesting this in public? Like, this is not, like, normal Irish people don't see this as an outrage. They don't give a fuck about you because you broke the law that already exists. If it was the law that they had a problem with, they would have protested that law, right? This is the law on the books within Ireland. Is there a protest movement within Ireland to make it legal to occupy vacant buildings? I mean, maybe you should begin there. If this is the thing you think that we need to focus on in Ireland, is that there's too many emptying buildings compared to the amount of homeless people, then focus on the law that's on the books, right? Focus on the law that's on the books and try to build a movement around, you know, repealing that law or amending that law. And like, okay, vacant buildings should be seized by the, and you do something like that, right? But when you engage in this fucking LARP and this adventurism, where you're gonna go and take over a fucking building illegally and then cry on the fucking internet when the police come and take you out. I mean, what did you think was gonna fucking happen? And you were given several warnings. They kept telling you, hey, we have a court order to evict you. Get out of this building. If you're still in this building after June 2nd, the police are gonna come and take you out. No, we are standing our ground. Okay, are you gonna take on the fucking Irish state? Are you planning a Rambo-style guerrilla war against the Irish state? Because I'm pretty sure they could just come and take your ass out. What did you think was gonna happen? They told you they're coming after June 2nd to take you out. They kept gloating and bragging about, no, the Connelly House, well, up the Connelly House, up the Connelly House. What does that do for you? What does that do for you? I mean, it's stupid. It's fucking stupid. Ireland is not in a revolutionary situation right now. So if it's not in a revolutionary situation, laws matter. Want to know why laws matter? Because the state isn't about to collapse. The state is still somehow legitimate in the eyes of the Irish masses, which means by breaking laws, you're not going to really garner sympathy, right? Unless it's some exceptional circumstance, like some kind of war is happening. You know, it's just like, it's such a stupid thing, right? But let me tell you what happened. All right, and it's gonna get weird. It's gonna keep getting weirder and weirder the more we delve into this. But So this is also something that happened, is that they blocked me. The Connelly House has blocked me, which is okay because we're just going to go on Nitter, N-I-T-T-E-R. And we'll just, yeah, they blocked me because they did not want me to cover this. Which was, you know, I mean, that's like a temporary, congrats guys for blocking me. I just went on the alternative website. So this is what happened, okay? All right, so let's like go through the timeline. Socialist Republicans keeping watch on the roof of Connelly House over the past 2 days against potential eviction. Why? What are you gonna fucking do if they try to evict you? What will you do? What do you mean you're keeping watch? What do you mean keep for what? What is your plan if they try to evict you? What are you gonna do? It's like, are you just gonna get wanted levels on GTA? Like, you're gonna like beat up the police and then just wait till they come out with tanks when you're at a 5-star wanted level? It's like, what is your plan here? I don't get it. What do you mean you're keeping watch over what? You're not, are you at war with the state right now? Like, what is this, right? It's fucking buffoonish and clownish and fucking stupid, right? And like, you tell these people this kind of shit and they just look, you say this stuff and then they just keep delving more into abstraction. They go, well, Hawes, you don't want to do any praxis. But this is your example of praxis. This is the example you've given us. So we have to focus on this specific thing that you have elevated to the status of true revolutionary real world praxis. So you can't take refuge in some generality that on the face of it sounds good. Yeah, it sounds good to say something like, let's go and do stuff in real life. But when these are the examples you give us of doing shit in real life, I mean, your generality collapses and becomes meaningless, okay? Today was remember our namesake, and 106 likes, remember your namesake. Wednesday at 6 p.m. there will be a meeting at James Connelly House to discuss the RW's ongoing campaign of housing acquisitions and attempts to remove activists from JCH and a way forward. So you're just going to keep doing this, and it's the same result that's going to happen. You're just going to keep occupying. I think they did occupy another house already. And they just don't stop. You're going to keep doing this and getting arrested and then complaining about it on the internet. You know what this is? This is a fucking getting your activists arrested simulator. That's what it is. It's a get your activists arrested the game. You're just simulating getting your fucking group arrested one by one. We're going to jail! Let's go to jail! We're going to prison! And their mommy and daddy's gonna come and bail them out because their, uncle's a lawyer or some shit. And they're like, no, please just, that always happens. You ever notice those Chaz people never go to jail? You ever notice no anarchist ever goes to jail? They always get, off somehow. The judge refused to jail the activists. Rally is called off. Updates to follow. Yeah, we won! Uh-oh. Looks like they didn't win. 40 Gardaí evicting people from James Connelly House around Marlborough, Dublin. So this is what happened. Oh my God, the injustice of the state. Oh my God. Help! Help! I'm being oppressed! Help! Help! I'm being oppressed! The injustice of the state!
Yeah.
Guess who's going to jail tonight? Guess who's going to jail tonight? Guess who's going to jail tonight? The James Connelly House was raided. Activists continue to remain strong and defiant. Oh my god! Oh my god, who could have predicted this? Oh my god! I can't believe it! So this is like the news we're looking at, right? Salvation Army regains building earmarked for refugees after a Garda operation, where they literally just sent police in and they just took them out. They just removed them. This is really shocking. Who could have predicted this? Oh my god! This was their other house that they took. Today at 8:30, they arrived at Liam Mello's house in Jamestown Square and arrested 2 activists fighting homelessness. So they took the other house too. I thought I was going to be in big trouble because I was like, well, they still have that other house, the Liam Mello's house, and maybe they'll still use that as an example of like the praxis that they could do, the revolutionary praxis they'll do. And turns out that they're just getting arrested from that one as well. We have been informed that the 2 activists dragged out and arrested by Garda are being held at Carolyn Garda Station now. Anyone available, please go and support them ASAP. Okay, now this is the weird part I wanted to get to, right? This is the weird part that's kind of like weirding me out, and I don't really know how to explain it all that well. It's kind of bizarre to me. It's quite a little bit bizarre. It's quite a little bit strange. It's quite a little bit out of the ordinary. If I do say so myself, it's a little bit bizarre, to say the very, very least. Quite a little bit bizarre. But, so here's this guy saying, footage of the Gardaí raiding the offices. Just kidding. They're actually evicting people from the James Connelly House. Now, the James Connelly House, like, how does anyone know what the James Connelly House is? Except people who are like, nobody knows what it's called, right? So this guy must know, right? Who is this guy? CEO Web Summit, Financial Times, world's largest tech conference, Forbes best tech conference. What? 70. Who is this? This is the CEO of the world's largest tech conference, Paddy Cosgrove. What? Why is he invested in this situation? How does he know what's going on? What the fuck? It's quite a little bit strange, if you ask me. Quite a little bit strange. Quite a little bit weird, if I do say so myself. So, what are the lessons we can draw from this? Give me a sec. So there's a word for this type of bullshit in Marxism. There's a word for it. Believe it or not, there's a word for this in the communist and socialist tradition, and it's basically called adventurism and volunteerism. It's adventurism and it's volunteerism. Now, what is adventurism? Adventurism is basically when you embark on these actions, for the thrill of it, and in order to kind of realize some kind of ideological vision or project without any regard pretty much for the consequences. Just like on an adventure, you don't know what the consequences are going to be. That's why it's adventurous and stuff. I mean, that's what it is, right? And then it's voluntaristic because it assumes that you're going to be able to like carry out some kind of transformation by the force of pure will alone without regard for what connection you have to the masses already, right? You're just going out guns blazing in public, expecting the masses to follow you. Instead of doing the much more difficult, protracted work of reaching out to the masses in a methodical and careful and more cautious and patient way, right? You're just going out guns blazing. It's like the equivalent of like running in public. Yeah, we're ready for the revolution. Who's with me? Who's with me? And then nobody's with you, and you act surprised and shocked. Who's with me? All right. My name's Paul Moron. I've just discovered the truth of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. I've just discovered the truth of the Red Revolutionary 1st of May, and I read it on my Kindle, and people have told me about it, and it's making me very, very angry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run outside naked, and we're going to the revolution! Who's with me? And lo and behold, got my fucking chair stuck at something. Lo and behold, nobody's interested. Nobody's interested in joining you. Nobody's interested in partaking in any of this. What a grand surprise. What a mighty surprise, right? What a big surprise. Because this is adventurism. Plain and simple, that's what it is. It's adventurism. Any other day, I'd laugh about this way harder. But it's like, it looks like we won. It looks like we won in this little encounter between us. I mean, I'd love to hear their argument. I almost want to like start a Twitter space and like, hey, what is your argument? What position do you have? Give me a second. It's a form of retarded adventurism, which just assumes that like the stars are all going to align in the right way. All we have to do is go out in public and announce to the world our commitment to this ideology, and the masses are going to follow suit. And this, I mean, it's so childish. It's so fucking childish. What did you expect was going to fucking happen? It's adventurism and it's criminal volunteerism. It's anarchism. This is what anarchists do. Instead of actually going to the masses and formulating a program, some kind, formulating a vision, formulating some kind of something that has to do with power in the sense of like something that relates to people in regards to the political situation that contains the seeds for some popular movement. I mean, instead of doing that, you're just going to go and you know what? This is perversion. It's literally like, you know what this is? Let me explain to you what the Connelly House is in essence. Let me explain to you what these types of actions in general are in essence. This is the type of anarchist and Maoist praxis that they do. It's literally like that guy who takes a picture of his dick and just sends it to his love interest, going straight to the chase. All right, send it away. And she opens her phone, she opens her text messages or her Twitter DMs or her Snapchat or her Instagram, and there it is, a bulging penis. Straight away to the case. His intention is there, his motivation is there, straight away to the case. My question is has that ever worked? Maybe I'm wrong, because so many dudes do it. It must work sometimes, right? I've never heard of it working, but it must work, right? For so many people to be doing this. I mean, I've never done that, even in a relationship. I've never done that because I'm just so ashamed of that idea, right? But it's such a shameful thought to me. It's such a disgusting, perverted thing to do. But like, I don't think it's ever worked, right? But that's exactly what they're doing. They're going in public and demonstrating an example of what our ideological vision for the world is. And hold on, it's just a little too front and center for people, if you get what I'm saying, which is to say, yeah, there's no law written anywhere that just because you're going out in public and directly trying to realize your ideological vision, that people are going to magically understand your specific consciousness and they're going to adopt your specific type of consciousness or your specific type of ideology. Nowhere is that written, because it's just not true. It's not how it works. People don't adopt your ideology by you going out in public and taking these drastic actions, risking yourself and risking your, oh, it's so brave and noble. But most people just see a bunch of hooligans and criminals doing some fuckery. That's the truth. That's the truth. If you actually do want to relate to masses in some kind of way, you have to relate to them within the capacity of the reality that they're familiar with and that they know about. You have to actually engage in politics, the politics that they actually, as far as they're concerned, is real. I just want to get to the essence of where this specific type of perversion, where they just think that this is an effective thing to do. I mean, I just want to get to the root of where that comes from. Where do people get this idea that this is a smart idea? This is some effective type of measure to take. I think it comes from the fact that, again, they're just too caught up in like this adventuristic, volunteeristic thing of, yeah, we're doing it. Dude, go to the gym. Go to the fucking gym if you want to do something. Quote unquote, do something, right? If you actually want to relate to the masses and build a movement, you're going to have an approach that's a little bit more patient and a little bit more mature and a little bit more grounded in reality.
Keep exposing these lumpins.
That's exactly what they are. They're lumpen criminals, right? They're just lumpen who think that their ideology gives them some holy writ power, regardless of the state of the masses, to just voluntarily engage in these like fantastical, dramatic interventions into reality. It's like Mussolini's March on Rome. We're just gonna march on Rome, and then the people, they're gonna be behind us because of the spectacular show we're gonna give them. We're marching out of Rome. But it's like what idea do you have? You're gonna do some theatrics, some dramatic theatrics that's illegal, and then it's gonna be so bombastic and so impressive to people. They're just gonna rally behind you and join you. No, what's gonna fucking happen is you're gonna go to jail. You're just gonna go to jail. That's all that's going to happen. You're not a threat to the status quo, and you're not a threat to the state. And I keep seeing these dumbasses be like, we have a homeless problem. Nobody cares if you're breaking the law. It doesn't matter what your justification is. It doesn't matter how you're trying to justify. Nobody cares about your intentions. You're breaking the fucking law in public. You're not able to protect yourself from the law in any kind of way. You're not powerful enough to take on the state. What do you expect is going to fucking happen? Those are the laws on the books. It's not like in the Irish laws they have some exception for, unless this is their reason. No, they don't give a fuck, dude. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you don't have to go to law school for a year like I did to know this, okay? If you go and murder someone in the name of Chairman Gonzalo, the judge is going to look at you, and when you're explaining to him your ideological motivations, he's going to be like, I don't give a goddamn fuck. You just committed first degree. You know what I mean? They don't care what your fucking reason is. Fucking stupid. It's so depressing. It's so depressing because I've been here before, guys. I've argued with people about this in real life many times. before, and they don't listen. They just keep doing this shit, and until they burn out and just give up on the ideology as a whole, because it's not giving them the immediate results that they were expecting. And it's really, really fucking sad. It's really sad. I mean, isn't it fucking sad that this even happened? And like, didn't we call this? Didn't we say this is what was gonna happen? Is that not, what is your fucking excuse? What is your excuse? I told you this was gonna fucking happen. What is your excuse? It actually makes me angry. You literally upheld this as an example of why they're better than us. Why? So, let me get this straight. Both of us accomplished nothing in that time span, right? Both of us accomplished nothing, right? Okay, well, you're in jail and I'm not. So all you did was play yourself. All you did was accomplish, either at best you wasted your time or you're like facing charges. They knew they would be kicked out from the beginning. So what is the point of doing this shit? Did they build a movement out of this? Are they building what? They didn't. It's not like they built a movement. They convinced a few people to be sympathetic to them. I probably convinced way more people to be sympathetic to me. What does that do you? What does that give you, huh? Oh, they're sympathetic to us. So what can you do with that? What is that gonna? What does that lead to? Where are the fucking results? I keep asking the simple question of results. Where the fuck are the results? It's the only question I ever impose or insist upon. I keep insisting on the question of where are the results. Does that make me such a bad guy and such a criminal? Where the fuck are the results? That's all I ask. Remember, guys, results are what matter in this world. Results are what matter. We are nowhere close to a revolutionary situation right now. Because we need to do step one of building a fucking organization and movement in the first place. By the way, some more things about Paul Moron before I finally move on. And I'm going to put a timestamp in like the description, like when the lecture actually begins. That guy was also responsible for like fucking up the Communist Party in his country. Something about he like caused a split. He's like a Fed, dude. He's like a weird glowy guy. He caused a split from the youth wing. And he wrecked his own fucking party. Up the Connelly House! Real world organizing! Touch grass and do praxis! There's your praxis. There's your touching grass. It did nothing. There's no result from it. Everyone's time was wasted. Some people are in jail, and not for reasons that couldn't have been foreseen. And before you say, like, this is just like when the Bolsheviks got arrested. No, it's not. Because the Bolsheviks didn't always foresee that they would get caught. They operated in the shadows when it was illegal to. And then when they did get caught, it was because they didn't see it coming. They didn't go out of their way to just get arrested. That's not something they would do. They were careful to try and not. When they started strikes and they would go into factories and do all that kind of stuff, they were being careful. They were being careful. It says you are doing material harm in your streams. What the fuck does that mean? Is that like a legal thing? What do you mean Oh, he's talking about the disinformation shit probably, right? Yeah, I don't give a fuck. I thought he was trying to say something like, I'm like hurting people or something. I'm like, what? Oh yeah, I don't give a fuck. Just lib shit. Doing material harm, like, I don't give a fuck. What the fuck does that even mean? My response to that is pretty much, that's pretty much like your opinion, man. That's my response. My response is that's just your opinion. You have to prove objectively how I'm doing. But anyway, one man's harm is another man's fortune, right? One man's harm is another man's whatever. I'm not going to dwell on this. Okay, let's now get into the lecture, okay? So let's have a palate cleanser. Let's clear the palate. Let's clear the plate. Because today I'm going to get in the lecture. And today I don't really care about views that much. And I'm not really stressed about that kind of stuff. Because I want this to be on the record, right? So that's what I care about. I just care about having this on the record. It's a shame the people who are not here to join us today are mentally retarded scumbags who can go fuck themselves, and I don't give a fuck about that. They're not real. They're not really part of our community, right? They're not really part of the community. Those people are fakes who are, you know. I hate them personally, right? I actually hate them personally, and I wish them bad dreams, right? Everybody who didn't make today's stream, I'm not debating anyone. It must not be an important stream. Yeah, those guys. I mean, you'll always be like the peasants of infrared. You'll always be like the serfs, the helots. You'll never actually be part of. Holy fuck! Thank you, Bodega Man.
Gorilla, son. Gorilla, son.
Yeah, as I was saying, those people will never actually be part of the OG. They'll never like be on the elite rank type of thing, right? Those are like the dumbass people who don't even know what's good for them, right? Anyway. Let's get right into it. I have shit in my throat. Let me clear my throat. Give me a sec. I'm going to begin this by talking about politics. I'm going to begin this by talking about politics and the state. Politics and statehood. And we're going to have to go pretty ancient, right? And I want you to suspend most of your prejudices and intuitions and have an open mind. Just have an open mind to the fact that maybe you don't quite understand what a state actually is. I need like a bucket to spit in. This is fucking insane. Every time I talk, every fucking time I talk,
Based.
I get
Gorilla,
shit in my throat.
son.
Give me a
Gorilla,
second.
son.
Give me a fucking second. since, let's call it the classical period of ancient Greece, philosophy as we know it, philosophy has been closely bound up with statehood and politics in particular. Probably the most famous work of Western philosophy, and philosophy as we know it in the Western sense, in the history of the world, was Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic being this text which united Plato's philosophical system with some kind of vision of a society, some kind of vision of a polity, of a republic. Now, what is it that unites these two things? Why did Plato unite his ideas about the mind and being and reality, philosophy, the realm of philosophy proper? Why was this united with a book or a text about a republic that basically is defining a super individual reality of collectives, right? A collective. What is the connection? What could the connection possibly be between those two things? Typically, we begin in our understanding of politics from a perspective of some kind of methodological individualism, which is to say, we begin with the individual as the substance of politics, the self-same rational individual. All I want to present right now, as far as right now is concerned, is the fact that for the overwhelming majority of mankind's history, the individual was not the substance of politics. The individual was not some unit of politics. Plato's philosophy, which unites the correct understanding of being by the individual mind, I should say, with some kind of outline of an ideal state, which is, of course, going beyond the bound and depth of the individual. Sorry, beyond the bound and scale of the individual. Now, how and why is that? How and why could that be? How is it that for Plato, philosophical correctness somehow can at the same time correspond to some type of republican virtue in which the individual will corresponds to some kind of collective reality? Karl Popper, who is the thinker behind George Soros and the Open Society Foundation, yada, 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 claimed that the number one threat and enemy to the open society was none other than Plato himself. Plato, the number one threat and enemy of the open society. Why? What actually is the crime of Plato? The crime of Plato, of course, is also the crime of Aristotle and the rest of the Greek philosophers. But Popper singles out Plato because scandalously, Plato represents a unity of the philosopher, the unity of the philosopher's truth with the political truth, which is to say, somehow, according to Plato, when we as individuals access the truth of being by the device of thought, we can correspondingly access the truth of our collective reality. We no longer only speak for ourselves in our own individual capacity, we are somehow accessing and participating in a supra-individual reality, a collective reality that imperils and involves the whole of a given polity and a community. So it's part of this reason why Popper will call Plato the enemy of the open society. Plato basically says we can know how a society should be. We can tap into the essence of society by the device of thought. We can tap into the essence of our collective social being by the device of thought. What that means is that when an individual participates in philosophy, they are not only doing so within the capacity as an individual. Plato does not only speak for Plato. Plato does not only speak for his substantive individuality, whether taken in the sense of his own physical body or the sum total of his own individual experiences. Plato participates in a discourse, in a language that is commonly accessible by mankind as a whole. Plato, of course, was not alone. Each of the Greek philosophers were also philosophers of politics. They also had specific views about statehood, statesmanship. After all, the sophists, against whom Plato constructed part of his philosophical project against, not only were sophists within the realm of epistemology and the mind and politics, the sophists were also, as such, within the realm of statehood. The sophists claim that all we would have to do is trick the masses into believing whatever bullshit we want to believe, and that from this we can derive legitimate, true state power. It basically be political hucksters that can bullshit their way into power, lying to the masses. And it wouldn't be a lie because we can make up the truth to be whatever we want it to, more or less, right? It was political sophistry, not just of the philosophical kind. Of course, it's not just philosophy and the discourse of philosophy that somehow establishes mankind in common. It's also something called language, more generally. Language proves that our individuality is not our own. Each and every one of us are separate physical individuals. We are separate physical bodies with different experiences and perhaps, of course, different relationships to material reality. But the manner by which we give expression to our individuality, the manner by which we define our own individuality, somehow is social and collective in nature, through the use, first and foremost, as far as the intuition is concerned to you, language. We all speak some kind of commensurate language. Moreover, we speak the same language, not just in public, in order that we can communicate with others. We speak the same language to ourselves in private. You will probably get the idea somewhere along the line. I'm gonna just spit in this fucking water bottle. Give me a fucking sec. Okay. Just gonna keep spitting in there. You have probably heard the commonsensical idea that what is the purpose of language? The purpose of language is to communicate. Now, you may not see it now, but I will demonstrate to you in the course of this lecture, throughout, precisely how this false understanding of language can also be the dividing line between different political ontologies, different metaphysics of statehood and politics, and differing, furthermore, ideological views, from Marxism, Leninism to anarchism, liberalism, and fascism on the other hand. The idea that language is simply a means of communication between individuals neglects the fact that language also possesses the role of articulating ourselves. We don't just use language to communicate with other individuals, because that presupposes the idea that each individual atom already has an individual identity. But it is language that gives us the identity that we have in the first place. So in a strange sense, language precedes our individuality. Language, in a strange sense, precedes our individuality. Language is how we come to understand what we are in the first place, before we can be worried about how we will communicate with others. It is through some kind of otherness in the form of language that we come to define what we are in the first place. What we are is only in relation to others, or to some kind of other in general. Typically, we call this other God. What are the implications of that? The implications of that is simple. Just by participating in language, forget about philosophy, but just language in general, we are participating in some kind of supra-individual reality. Now, let me premise and define supra-individual reality. This reality may very well, in the material sense, come down to us in some biological, natural, physical capacity. Maybe. But insofar as we conceive of ourselves as individuals, this is going to be mediated in a way that goes beyond the threshold of our ability to know or define our individuality. So let me rephrase that. It may very well be the case that the object of the whole thing is some kind of physical, biological self-interest. Maybe. That's not important, because insofar as we conceive finitely of that interest, we are already doing so within terms established beyond that specific individuality. I am not myself. You are not yourself. This true individuality, let's say, this real, let's call it, with a capital R, real individuality, could only ever relate to our minds, could only ever relate to our knowledge as some kind of transcendental object, some kind of object that goes beyond the bounds of both experiential and rational knowledge, some kind of transcendental knowledge that is beyond the threshold of our conscious understanding, relating to us only in some kind of unconscious sense. By the way, any retard in the chat wants to debate me or challenge me about any of this, get in VC. Specifically ZVZ. I have a stupid fucking student in my chat, ZVZ. What's so funny, ZVC? Go ahead, spit it out. spit it out so the teacher can slap you back into humility, you little bitch. Go ahead. Tell us what's so funny. Make us laugh. Oh, you're making fun of the dude that got blamed. So you're not paying attention to the actual lecture at hand. And you're disrupting my classroom like a monkey jumping up and down. Disrupting my classroom. So you share with the class what's so funny, and the professor's not laughing. The professor's not laughing. The professor doesn't find it funny. So it couldn't have been that funny, could it have been? It can't be that funny because it didn't make the professor laugh. That's okay. This is a Mediterranean academy. Let's continue. Let's continue. In this sense, the question is very simple. What is the individual? Rather than simply explain to you what has been explained many times before, that we are not simply individuals, that we belong within some kind of social whole or social totality. Let's go a step further beyond this cheap criticism of European individualism. Let's rather ask the true question. What is an individual? What is it that makes an individual? Because an individual is quite a mysterious thing. An individual is quite a mysterious thing. As Heidegger would put it, an individual is a being remit with the question of what it is they are. That is Dasein, according to Heidegger. An individual is a being which enters this world asking the question of what it is. Now, a retard will tell you that an individual is a discrete biological organism. A discrete biological organism. They are bluffing and pretending to have knowledge that they, as a matter of fact, do not have. What is the genesis of this biological organism? Well, the birds and the bees, and then... But what is it? Where does it come from? What about the whole of cosmos and the whole of being gives rise to something like a human individual? A human individual, moreover, cursed with the quality of questioning what it itself is. This very question is realized in the polity or in the republic. That is what the republic realizes. The republic of Plato is not just, the republic of Plato is not some kind of model, arbitrary model of this is how I think society should be run. It should be this. That is not what Plato's republic is. If you think that's Plato's republic, I want you in a video game to find the nearest river and jump in it and let it take you off of Niagara Falls. Because I'm sick of hearing people like you. The Republic is an answer to a question. The question being that very question of being. What are we? It is the Republic that realizes this. The Republic realizes our true being. How? How? What is this Republic? Is it a tangible thing? Is it a little thing like this that we can hold and grasp in our hands in some kind of way? No. So how could it be the truth of our being? How is it that the Republic can be the truth of our being? The question is very simple. Why do we make the assumption? Why do we make the assumption that in order for something to be real, it must possess the quality of sensuous and empirical tangibility? Why do we possess this assumption that in order for something to be real and material, it must possess the quality of sensuous tangibility? The problem, of course, and the paradox already pointed out by Immanuel Kant, who's dealing with this precise issue in response to empiricism, is this: whereupon we as individuals come across a sensuously and empirically tangible thing, there are already a myriad of ways in which we are structuring that object before we enter into empirical and sensuous intercourse with it. Which means, before this is a real thing to me, I have somehow structured it in some kind of way that I cannot control or arbitrate consciously. There are things we take for granted, in other words, that define our relationship to empirically definite and sensuous objects. What did Marx say? Men and women enter the world of their own creation. Unbeknownst to them that it is of their own creation. What did Marx say? He said, men and women make history, but not as they please. Men and women enter into relations over which they neither have any control nor any conscious knowledge of. When we enter this world as individuals, we are already embedded within some kind of relation. Some kind of relation over which we have no control. Soda Blood thought it was smart to dab in the chat. Soda Blood, go ahead and explain to the class why you're dabbing. Explain to the class what a dab is. Explain to the class what that is. It's a cough. Explain to class why you cough out loud. Explain to class. Did you mean to ask a question? To interrupt my lecture?
based,
Pardon me, sir, but can you debate Gematria Effect News?
I'll debate anyone who dares rear their head. I'll debate any of these people. All right, everybody. Soda Blood is the resident dunce for coughing in the middle of my lecture. Make sure they're known as the resident dunce. Change their name to resident dunce. They're wearing the dunce cap in the corner. Since you want to interrupt my lecture. Teacher, can I use the bathroom? I don't know, can you? Can you? And the answer is no, you can't. Hold it. You have to hold it. Now, I'm going to ask the class a question. What was I just covering? What was I just covering, class? And there's going to be many beatings if I don't see widespread knowledge of what I was just talking about. Fine, I'll take that. What is an individual? But what specifically? I was talking about how we always make the assumption that in order for something to be real and to be materially real, it has to be empirically and sensuously tangible. The problem with this, of course, has been discovered or laid out already by Kant. That the things that are sensuously tangible to us already presuppose, let's call them a set of relations that are within, in Kant's case, the categories of the understanding, or in Marx's case, relations to production that precede that. Tangibility, sensuous tangibility, is not what defines reality. Reality is defined by the contradictions within the relations of the objects presented within our phenomenal purview. It is in the contradictions between the various things and objects that we can discover their reality and materiality. It is in the very discrepancy between the word of a thing and the thing itself that we discover reality. We have to change our understanding of what is real. Why did Paul Moron say that he's doing real world action? Because Paul Moron is doing things empirically tangible. He's feeling things. He's touching things. It's all empirically tangible. This is the furthest extent of the relation between Anglo-Saxon metaphysics and reality. It is empirical tangibility. How can the Republic be something real if it is not empirically tangible? I answer that question quite simply. The Republic is an object. The republic is the name of an object. A state is the name of an object. An object that reveals itself only in the relationship between things and between individuals. The state, the republic, these are not things. These are words that describe the relationship of things, not the least of which being included individuals.
Based.
How do we understand the reality of a nation/culture? Thank you, us.
I'll get to that, hopefully. We have arrived at an understanding. An understanding now of politics, which renders the masses, which renders the people that are the subject of the state, the subject of the politics, blind, sheep-like, oblivious, empty, and blank. If it is true that the truth of politics and the truth of our own individual reality reveals itself in a way that is in no way immediate to us in any phenomenal, experiential, or rational, or epistemic sense, then we stand before the form of the expression of our own being, naive, blank, childlike, and ignorant. The individual is not the vessel of politics. The individual is not the truth of politics. Because the individual stands before the politics as a student stands before their master, asking the simple question of what am I? Politics and the state give expression to our individuality in a way that is more fundamental than what is within the immediate and proximate sense of the individual. What do the anarchists say? What does the liberals say, actually? Forget about the anarchist. What does the liberal say? The liberal conceives of the state as an externality upon the already constituted individual. The liberal conceives of the state, the sum total of already constituted individual wills. Rousseau, what did he say? Man is born free, but everywhere he finds himself in chains. Haas says no. Haas, the German, says no to Rousseau, the Frenchman. as the German says, the individual is born nothing. It is the state that gives them freedom. The individual is neither born good or evil, neither free, neither in chains. The individual is born nothing. Why does the liberal begin with the presupposition that the individual, moreover the self-constituted individual, is the substance of politics? I have given you the example of ancient Greece, but it would be superfluous for even the most minimally educated person for me to point out the understanding within the rest of mankind and mankind's history of the relationship between the individual and the state. The individual is given expression by the external reality that molds them. The truth of the individual is revealed only in the contradictions that manifest themselves at the level of our superficial collectivity. We are not first self-constituted individuals. Our individuality is itself constituted in a way external from us. What happened? What changed to give rise to the liberal view and the liberal conception? The key word, of course, here being the self-constituted individual. What does this phrase, self-constituted individual, remind you of? It should remind you, as a matter of fact, as nothing short of the bourgeoisie of early modernity. The bourgeoisie experiences their reality as self-standing and self-constituted individuals. The bourgeoisie walks around with their nose in the sky, reducing everything before them to the common and abstract measure of price. Is the bourgeois with their nose high up in the sky, not merely smelling the shit of the king whose ass is already above them? The bourgeoisie conceives of itself as self-constituted, conceives of the state, the monarchy, and moreover all external realities that confront them as obstacles to its mercantile interests. However, the bourgeoisie takes a great deal for granted in terms of what actually defines its individuality. It conceives of itself as self-constituted, but it is anything but. The bourgeoisie does not constitute itself. The world of humanity constitutes the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie then only survives as a point of exception within this world of feudal and patriarchal and ancient relations. The bourgeoisie is the individuality constituted from the perspective of their negation in profit, in excess, a surplus which, by virtue of its indeterminacy, confronts the entire manifold of human and substantive relations as nothing, as mere forms of nothingness.
Based.
Chat needs to remember that Oz won his opponent's PhD in a recent debate. Thank you for the lecture, Dr. Oz.
Let me fast forward for you in time, now that I've given you this bombastic introduction. I would like to call your attention to the following paradox. Let us establish the most simple relation between a subject and a political form of their representation. The working class, the class struggle, innit? The working class, innit? Oh, blimey, mate. There's a class struggle going about between the working class and the capitalist class, innit? Innit? Bruv, those blokes, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, they wasn't the working class. They wasn't the working class. They wasn't working in the factories. Blimey, mate, what's up with that? What's up with that? Because when I talk about the working class, I'm talking about the individuals. I'm talking about the individuals. That's what I'm talking about, mate. The individuals. Lenin was in a working class, and that Haas guy, blimey, he's not working class. He's a streamer. How can he talk about the blimey working class? Bollocks to your theory, bollocks to your literature, bollocks to your philosophy, innit? My working class don't care about any of this. How could the working class possibly understand any of that, Hayes? Dialectics and Hegel are a bunch of rubbish. The working class doesn't understand Hegel, so it's rubbish. Rubbish. It's all rubbish. Bollocks to it all. The working class doesn't understand it. The manner by which the Bolshevik establishes a relation to the working class is not an extension of the way in which the bourgeois state posits itself to establish a relation to the whole people. The bourgeois state, the parliamentary state, I should add, of the English Empire, the British Empire, establishes a relation to private persons as a representative that is direct. Parliament represents the whole people because the whole people are literally being represented in Parliament in their private interest. The bourgeois state says, I am an empty vessel. It is through votes that I will be given content and expression. I am an empty vessel. The people vote and choose the content of the state. This is the bourgeois state. The bourgeois state, which presupposes the self-constituted citizen, the rational and self-same individual. So what is the bourgeois conception of the state? A bunch of individual atoms, self-constituted and self-same individual citizens, which decide who they want to represent them on the ballot within their individual capacity. And so, you get what you pay for. But who voted for Lenin, mate? Who voted for him? How could the Bolshevik party be a party of the working class when the party was not even open to the workers at the time? Which it wasn't. It wasn't. The whole Bolshevik-Menshevik dispute was because Lenin insisted on not opening the party to the masses to become individual members. Communist parties have always been reserved for the best of the best and the elite of society. And the more numerous they grew when they were actually in power, the more numerous this elite section of society itself grew. How could that possibly be? How could that possibly be? How could it possibly be that proletarian consciousness can be first beheld by people who do not individually belong to the proletarian class? Because the Communist Party, I'll answer it for you. Because the Communist Party participates in a sphere that is more fundamental than our individuality. The Communist Party participates in a sphere of class struggle more fundamental than the individual members of the class themselves. The interests of the proletariat can only be represented singularly. One will, one representative, one Communist Party. The falsehood of political paganism consists in the idea that we all are different individual snowflakes with different ideologies. No. Whatever ideology we have, whatever view of society we have, is a view that can be reproduced. There's nothing special about us. It can be reproduced. As a matter of fact, I'm going to explain the class struggle in rather simple terms to you, since you don't understand. Plato has a universal conception of the whole of society as an individual. Surely it can be reproduced. Surely it refers to something more fundamental than Plato as an individual. And so if that is the case, what obstacles stand in the way of other individuals being able to perceive the same truth as Plato and his Republic? In other words, let's say Haas has a political ideology. What separates another individual from adopting that political ideology? If it is universal, if it is in fact universal, what separates another individual from adopting that ideology? As it so happens, and this is going to come as a big surprise.
We're here for the theory and grateful, Professor. After stream, check Twitter DMs at People's Badger.
I will. As it so happens, there are somehow political differences within a given society. And so the bourgeois liberal looks at these multitudes of political differences and simply posits the following explanation. They posit the following explanation. These differences are down to individual disagreements. We are all separate, different individuals with different individual interests. So the political differences within a given society merely reflect individual differences. Therein would reside a profound tragedy, if it were true. Because if this is true, then each and every one of us can be Platos, can be philosophers who think in our own head, we perceive that we are somehow arriving at something universal, something which relates to us all in common, something which is universally true for all of us. But while we think this subjectively in our head, we are merely giving expression to our own individual point of view. Ladies and gentlemen, do you not see the profound tragedy at hand implied by liberalism? The tragedy is as follows. We conceive of ourselves. We somehow in our heart, let's say intuitively, believe we can refer to the common universal reality of our communities, of our polities, of our countries, and now of the world globally. We can somehow access a universal truth of all humanity. But there is no connection between this and the real existing universal humanity. It's not real. Plato was dreaming. He was just dreaming. wasn't real. It was just Plato the individual. This is the bourgeois conception of politics. And so, since there can be no connection, tragically, between the individual and the universal humanity, the bourgeois state resigns itself to a position of empiricism. We cannot know the political truth of society. We cannot know the political truth of humanity. So, we must resign ourselves to establishing a state, an open society, if you will, which does its best to try and approximate what all of these differing individual wills want and arrive at a consensus of some kind between the differing interests and wills of the individual. Thank you, Jackson, for the raid. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it so much. Appreciate that raid, man. I'm in the middle of a anti-Soros lecture. That was Karl Popper's view of the open society. The open society, as I've said before, simply refers to this following idea. We cannot know the truth of universal humanity by means of politics. Why? Because there are differences within the interests of humanity. So the bourgeois liberal conceives those differences at the level of the individual. It's just differing individual interests. Now, unsurprisingly, the anarchist is the same. The anarchist, in their view, the state is an oppressive instrument upon the individual's ability to freely exercise their will. And so individuals need to come together and form some kind of consensus together, this commingling of individual wills from scratch. Annihilate the state, form a community from scratch that allows for a consensus that is as immediate and tangible to us as Descartes' "I think, therefore I am." We will, therefore we are, for the anarchist. Our consensus is just so, and there is the furthest extent of our statehood. This is the view of the anarchist. But now you understand that it is individualism which is the common denominator. You understand it is the individual which is the common denominator. Definite individuals and definite institutions of the state which recognize and which refer only to the people as a whole, as one universal commingling of differing and even contradictory private wills. This is the people of the bourgeois state. It is the people of individual wills that are in contradiction with each other. It is the Hobbesian state of the war of all against all. Why is it that the communist view, and I'll qualify that even better, the proletarian view, why is it necessarily different? we need only begin from how the proletarian class is defined from Marx to understand the essence of communist dictatorship. The proletariat is a being defined by a Promethean shame, primordial shame. The proletariat is not the self-constituted individual that the bourgeoisie is, because the proletariat cannot take its individuality for granted. The truth of the proletariat's individuality is set before it in the cog-turning steel mills, in the looms, in the production lines and assembly lines, in this mechanical and repetitive movement of their work. The proletariat bears witness to its own innards, its own intestines being dragged out and ripped out before it in the machinery of modern industry. Thank you, Emilio. Appreciate it. The proletariat is defined by one who owns nothing except their own labor. To own only your own labor means to own the very source of property, the subjective essence of property, as Marx called it. That's all they own. They don't own any self-constituted and already definite, already tangible form of property. They only own their labor, which is the source of property. Now, what implications could this possibly have? What implications could this possibly have? It has the following implications. Waiting for this donut. It's just not going to go through. It's just not going to go through, I guess.
Based.
Do you love or hate industry?
Love. The implications that this has is that for the proletariat, not only is the form, the sovereign form of the commodity not given to it, because the proletariat is selling the very source of commodities through its labor. For the proletariat, not even its own individuality is given to it. The proletariat somehow bears witness to the genesis of individual identity through labor itself. The things and goods that define the individual, define what an individual is, for the proletariat, cannot be taken for granted. All you have to do is look at the way the proletariat reproduces itself. This drivel makes no sense. Have you considered you are mentally retarded and deeply deficient in your brain? Have you considered you're mentally retarded? Have you considered you're mentally retarded? It makes perfect sense. The proletariat is defined by a primordial shame. The shame being the fact that it has to live off of the very source of dignity that the bourgeoisie can take for granted. The proletariat has to live on the sale of the very thing that makes us individuals in the first place. You know what that means? It means we can't even take our individual identity for granted. Or they can't even take their individual identity for granted. They have to actively sell the very source of individual identity in order to survive. That's different from the bourgeoisie, who proceeds as an already constituted individual that is before capital, before profit making, a different word for it, before the making of money, as someone who is defined by the selling of goods. That means that before the institution of the state, the bourgeoisie is a free and abstract sovereign subject. It's a sovereign subject that sells goods, the products of human labor. It has only the products of human labor, which means it does not have to deal with the social process by which their goods come into existence. In an antisocial way, they acquire the goods, and these goods belong to them individually. You say this is drivel that makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Since the proletariat cannot take its individuality for granted, since the proletariat deals directly with the source of sovereign individuality through its very labor, it relates to its political identity also in a different way. Whereas the bourgeoisie relates to its political identity as an already constituted citizen, for which the state is, as a matter of fact, merely the empty vessel for whose will to be realized. The proletariat also, just in as much as it finds its labor lost in production, is a class which finds its consciousness lost in the vicissitudes of philosophy, of ideology, and of consciousness. The interests of the proletariat are not the sum total of individual interests. It is an interest universally articulated by the hand of the proletarian philosopher king, the proletarian Plato, who correctly perceives and articulates the consciousness of the proletariat and proves the correctness of this articulation by means of their ability for it to be related to by the proletarian class. They prove the proletarianness of their consciousness by the ability for that consciousness to be an object for the proletariat themselves. In other words, through the political praxis of winning the masses, the communist leader proves the proletarianness of their position. It is not in the sum total of the disparate, confused, and conflicting wills of the class that the singular interest of the proletariat acquires form. It is in the singular articulation of the interests of the proletarian class that it acquires form. The singular form of the Communist Party. And there is fundamentally a discontinuity between the form of the party and the individual reality of the masses of proletarians. And the reason for that discontinuity is not because of alienation. It's not because of elitism and oppression and exclusion. It's because the proletariat only acquires universal reality in the form of the party. Only there do its definite and determinate interests supersede the interests of the individual. So, how does the Marxist, how does the communist respond to the dilemma of Plato? I just told you what this dilemma is. The dilemma is the following. Plato, the philosopher, presupposes that the object of his philosophizing is held in common by universal humanity. The tragedy, however, is the fact that there are different conflicting political interests within society. The bourgeoisie responds to this by saying that these are merely the differing interests of different individuals. The Marxist, the communist, the Prometheus who returns to mankind its sacred and ancient wisdom, that there is a connection between the individual and universal humanity. That universal humanity in its actual reality is not just the coincidental sum total of individual wills. There is a connection. The individual can make a connection to universal humanity. How does it do this? It does this by establishing a difference at the heart of universal humanity, as well as the universality of the bourgeois state, different than the differences between various competing individuals. It is none other, ladies and gentlemen, than the difference of class struggle. There are different classes of the universal state and the universal polity. And it is precisely by being cognizant of these different classes that we may yet again, within our individuality, reclaim a connection between the individual and universal humanity and restore and complete the wisdom of Plato against the nihilism and degeneracy of bourgeois and liberal society. We rekindle the fire. The fire of Heraclitus, out of which the consistency of the Platonic form arises. This is what Lenin did. This is what the October Revolution did. Understanding class struggle means that we can somehow scientifically account for the political differences within society, not as the expression of the differences of individual wills, but of the differences between classes. And has been consistently the prejudice of Anglo-Saxon liberalism, of which anarchism is a guilty culprit, that the assumption has time and time again been made that classes are referring to the sum total of individual wills. The problem with this stupidity is that it renders a notion of class struggle pointless. If classes are merely the sum total of individual wills and is merely a universality defined by what is in common, coincidentally, between these individual wills, class struggle could have no causal reality. Classes would merely be the accidental harmony of common interests between individuals. And in this way, we could not possibly go from a bourgeois conception of the polity and of the universal humanity and statehood to the proletarian understanding of a world defined by class struggle. We would not be able to establish that leap if we possess the notion that classes are composed of individuals whose interests are coincidentally in common. If that was the case, class would be an ephemeral, accidental, and politically meaningless contingent reality that would have no causal reality. We could not describe our world in terms of class struggle because class is merely the accidental result of a more fundamental causal reality, being the reality of the individual. Class struggle is meant to revive and redeem the Platonic view of universal humanity. In materialist terms,
based,
thank you, Nino.
Keep plugging, brother.
based,
Professor Oz, have you investigated managerialism? A la Burnham? Based Marxists need this. PLS don't tell $hitlabs.
Not Burnham, but I have an idea of what managerialism is, but just not through Burnham specifically and in particular. But I do have a conception of managerialism in general, more general terms. The aristocracy possesses beauty and the proles don't. I'll show you the beauty the aristocracy possesses. This is their beauty. I'll show you their beauty. Here it is. The beauty, ladies and gentlemen, of the aristocracy, of which the proletariat possesses no possession. Ready? Here it is. The beauty of the aristocracy. The beauty of their aristocracy. Here is the beauty of the aristocracy. Of course, the aristocracy has no beauty. Beauty is the unity of opposites. The aristocracy is defined by the incest of self-same form. How could a form that does not continuously replenish itself in its true material opposite ever be remit with the quality of beauty? Class struggle means there is struggle within universal humanity, which is to say there are different universal humanities. This also aligns, coincidentally, neatly with theories of multi-polarity that have been presented by Alexander Dugin. But that is the essence of class struggle, that there are different universal humanities. It's not that there is one universal humanity and differing individual interests. There are different universal humanities, and that is what accounts for political difference within a given society. Plato was right. I want to establish this very clearly to you. This is the most crucial part of my lecture. So pay very close attention to what I tell you here. This is the most important part. This is also why I've instructed you to join the Communist Party. This is the most important part of the lecture. So buckle in and get ready. What are we doing when we as individuals commit ourselves to the discipline of a party, as the Bolsheviks had done? What is a party? What is an organization? How does something like an organization become tangible? How does it manifest itself as somehow real? Because it establishes a pattern, some kind, within the differences that define the multitude of our language and of our activity. It is within the gaps, within the contradictions and interstices that an organization becomes apparent. I'll give you an example of this. Let's say someone works for an organization. I work on the field for an organization. Some have said, some may allege, for example, let's say I supply goods for an organization. I perform some kind of labor for an organization, some kind. Ayn Rand would say something like, who's your boss? Who's your boss? Whoever you're taking orders from, that's the truth of the organization. It's just some individual that you're listening to. Some other individual. But what Ayn Rand doesn't take into account is the way in which even the boss submits himself before the law of the organization, effectively participating in it just as the workers are, impersonally. This is clear when you see leaders in Japan, leaders of companies, and in Asian countries, even the boss resigns themselves to the discipline of the corporation. So there is some kind of reality irreducible to our individuality. How do we access and discern that reality? We do so only in the definite patterns defining our behavior. Moreover, within the gaps of our language. The consistency of the deliveries I'm making on this truck, running supplies for the organization. This way in which I subordinate my interests to these interests. The way within the hierarchy of being as given representation by language that I subordinate beings to this organization. That is the organization. The organization is not empirically tangible. It is discernible only by various patterns and inconsistencies across the multitude of relations between empirical things. That is the organization. And yet somehow the organization, in our minds, intuitively, we see that as what's precedent. We see that as somehow primary. And we see the individual as secondary. When you, for example, think of a company, you don't think of the company in terms of the workers. When you're going to Target, you think, oh, this is a worker working for Target. Now, a dumb fuck anarchist or fake Marxist will say, that's because of bourgeois consciousness. Actually, Target is the workers. No, Target is not the workers any more than the Bolshevik party is Lenin and is the individuals. Target is some pattern defining the way a host of individuals are defining their lives and behavior. So when you're at Target, you're not wrong for not seeing the employee as Target. I have to piss. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. So, an organization is more than just individuals. If an organization is more than just individuals, then what is it? The thing is, we make assumptions about what the individual is based on the Cartesian mistake of thinking that an individual is the same as the way in which individuality is tangibly immediate to us. That individuality is the same as the means by which it is disclosed to us. That's the mistake. We are more than that. We are more than that. We account for our individuality in ways that inevitably involve others. So all of this philosophical confusion and stuff I lay upon you, coming from, remember, the central question of the relationship between the party, the Communist Party, and the proletarian class. It's not a direct relationship. The anarchist believes, for example, that the masses themselves will rise up. But we believe this is true, the masses will rise up, but they take it literally. Which means, what does that mean? It means the anarchist goes in public naked. They're naked and they're swinging their dick around. And then they do this saying, we are the masses, we are the masses. But you're not the masses because only a specific, particular type of person is doing this behavior. Not the proletarians. The Connelly House. What did the Connelly House people say? The working class of Ireland is retaking these homes. But it's not. It's a specific type of person who's retaking the homes. It's not a social phenomenon. If it's not a social phenomenon, then these are intelligentsia. These are failed philosophers pretending and disguising themselves amongst the multitude while failing to discern differences within the multitude. Now, this is a point of agreement that both a Marxist-Leninist and a liberal will have. Why? Because the liberal is going to look at the anarchist direct action and they're going to say, you are not doing that on behalf of the masses, you're doing that on behalf of your own individual interests. The Marxists will also say, you are not doing this on behalf of the masses, you're doing this on behalf of your own interests. But the Marxists will add, these are not simply your individual atomic interests. These are the interests of your psychotic lumpen class, your specific class. Herein lies the significance of class struggle. You see, the only way in which it is possible to establish some kind of relation to the masses is by turning your back on the masses. What do I mean by that? I mean by acknowledging the fact that we are not the masses. There's a discontinuity between us and the masses. We are not the masses. We are somehow an articulation. We are somehow a reflexivity that is not immanently one and the same as the masses. Only by doing this and taking responsibility for our actual role is it possible then to establish a relation to the masses. Because suddenly we don't proceed by saying, we are the masses. We say, no, we are communist intellectuals of some kind. We seek to reach the masses because we are not them. We are people who dedicate ourselves to politics. We are people who dedicate ourselves to a cause, an idea. And how we establish this cause as bounded up with the interests of the masses, first and foremost proceeds in the form of articulating the real movement already in place and already in existence correctly. Correctly perceiving the class struggle already in existence. Setting ourselves up as strategists who seek to bring this movement victory. We are not the masses experiencing itself. That's not what I'm trying to say. Don't obfuscate what I'm saying. I'm trying to say masses merely refer to those multitudes that have not yet been inscribed with the definite form of our own consciousness. Hence, they are masses. Masses, not individuals, masses. We are individuals. Someone can be part of the masses and then join us to be an individual. We can be both part of the masses and individuals. But insofar as we are communists, we are individuals, not masses. But we're more than individuals. We are soldiers and fighters of an organization and a party where the bourgeois distinguishes himself from the masses just by being a self-same individual. The communist distinguishes themselves from the masses by being a soldier and fighter, a part of the definite party of the working class. A partisan. That's what a communist is. It's a partisan. The masses and the partisan are not the same thing. Chaos wants to debate. About what? How do you ensure that the party has the same interests as the interests of the masses if we are not one and the same as them? Hey, good question, because this is exactly what I want to educate about. My whole point is that the interests of the masses don't exist except in the form of a party. A party is a party of Plato. When someone decides to sit down and just think about shit, they are participating in some kind of collective reality. It is not as though the masses already have given interests. The interests of the masses are always already being articulated by the various differences of the ways in which different Platos are conceiving of our collective reality. Insofar as our social reality becomes an object of contemplation, it is already charged with the quality of having a class character. There's a reason why Marx discovers proletarian consciousness. Marx begins with the highest development of philosophy, Hegel. He arrives at the proletariat only when he discovers something imminent within the development of pure thought, pure philosophy, some imminent contradiction that forces him to open himself to the meaningfulness of the reality outside of philosophy because of an internal contradiction within it. Now, this reality outside of philosophy, this remainder, this excess, is not some alternative philosophy. It is neither some empirically tangible thing, some concept in reality to replace the concepts of thought. No, it is the real. It is the meaning in the real itself. That meaningfulness in the real itself means we as philosophers somehow, we Platonic philosophers, let's say, somehow resign ourselves to the openness of the fact that the truth we discover up here in heaven is the same truth being disclosed to us from earth. We make finally the connection between the universal truth of philosophy and the reality of humanity. That was how Marx discovers the proletariat. The proletariat, these masses, are not simply masses in the sense of some mere private interests. Remember what Marx called the proletariat, the ingenious soil of the people. If the proletariat is the ingenious soil of the people, it basically amounts to the fact that it epitomizes the universal truth of humanity. Let's put it this way. A brave and ballsy philosopher does what Marx did. If you don't do what Marx does at the end of your philosophy, even your philosophy will be false. It will not have the quality of truth. That is why philosophy as a whole today, it's a bullshit, false enterprise. You must see that the masses are the makers of history and join the domain of the masses. You must come off your sensitive fascist pedestal and face the anarchy. You're just confused. You're just confused. You're just fundamentally confused. When one speaks of the masses, they're not literally referring to the sum total of these different individuals. That's not what it's meant by the masses. You end up with stupidity when you think of this in this way. No, the proletariat is not directly the individual. Again, that's the bourgeois conception of political metaphysics. Class struggle means there's no direct relation between the political consciousness of the proletariat and the proletariat in their actual existence as individuals. There's no direct relation at all. Who's in show queue? If you're in show queue, go in show request and tell me what the fuck you want. Don't just sit there and think I'm gonna drag you in. I don't know what the fuck you want. Hegel disagrees with what? With what?
Based.
Have you studied formal logic?
A little bit.
Based.
Midway point about chins, I'm afraid. And seems to contradict your point about Bolsh versus Mensch.
What?
Based.
He salutes the whole time he pisses.
True.
Based.
Please give your opinion of transhumanism.
It won't. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. I'm trying to basically establish to you guys the difference between communist dictatorship, ultimately, beginning with the example of the Bolshevik Party, and anarchism and fascism. This is really the point here. The difference being, it seems like they're the same, because both suspend the liberal form of sovereignty in which we simply defer and relegate our power to some precedent form. And it seems like the Bolshevik decisions are made in accordance with the anarchic, chaotic individuality, right? Whim and will. But in the case of communist dictatorship, it merely appears this way from the liberal perspective. That's why liberals can't tell the difference between communist and fascist dictatorship. It appears this way, but in reality, the dictatorial will being exercised under communism obeys the common rationality of some class interest. Know that class interest does not exercise itself in the form of bourgeois liberal sovereignty, where each individual member of the class drafts the legislative bill, but the individual will is beholden to a discipline of some kind beyond itself. No communist leader acts as a whimsical dictator. It appears that the dictatorship is anarchic and anarchist. It's not. It is beholden first to the discipline of the collective form of the party. And then this very party and the decisions that it makes is beholden to the discipline of a very acute philosopher king perception of the course of development of society and the class struggle and the class antagonism. This is the fundamental difference. Anarchists say that the Bolsheviks established themselves as dictators against the rest of society. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is that it assumes that by itself, statehood is an interest. It's not. Statehood and political form is a vessel by which universal humanity finds determinate interest. The bourgeois liberal view says no, because the state is merely the domination of some individuals over others, and there's only individuals. But this is not the communist view. And moreover, it's wrong. I always reproach these anarchists who talk about the Bolshevik coup and the Bolshevik dictatorship, and they're seizing all the power for themselves. I always reproach them with the following question. Why? Why are they doing that? Just power for power's sake? The ability to order people around? The ability to have the sword of Damocles hanging over your head? Meaning the ability to like put your life in danger and always have all this pressure and burden of doing this work of the state? Or is it the mere egoistic ability to live a luxurious life, something you could easily doing by living your life as a bank robber instead? You really mean to tell me that these Bolsheviks and these communists merely seized power because they wanted to sit on rocking chairs and sip lemonade or something? No! That wouldn't account for the immense level of self-sacrifice and heroism. People going and giving up their literal life for this. It wouldn't account for the fact that people like Stalin didn't live a luxurious life at all. Stalin slept on a cot. He lived very modestly. Mao did as well. And even if they didn't, there's a million other ways they could have just gotten rich and ran with the money instead of working themselves to death sometimes, but working so hard. It doesn't even properly describe the nature of corruption. Corruption doesn't happen when you selflessly use state power to serve private ends. Corruption happens when for you lack the will to actually be a powerful statesman for whatever reason, because there's a limit of your power of some kind, your limit to your ability to exercise power. So you simply say, oh, there's an opening here. Let me just take this opening on the side. While I perform my regular duties as a statesman, I'll exercise this extra shit on the side. It's not simply that they're in power just to get rich or whatever. No, they're in power to do their duty. It's just that their duty is not enough to exhaust the need of humanity. Corruption stems and is the result of a lack of resolve and political will above all. Remember that. Remember what I just fucking told you guys. Corruption stems from a lack of resolve and a lack of political will. For example, our Congress members, our Senate and our House, right? Why are they corrupt? They don't have the will to do anything. So on the side, what do they start doing? They start taking money and taking bribes because they don't have the resolve to actually represent the people and make the necessary changes that serve the interests of the people. So they do their regular duties and their regular functions. And then it just so happens to be the fact that on the side, there's all these other opportunities that come with that, right? Corruption is not the result of private individuals usurping the power of the state for their own individual ends. Corruption is the result of the corruption of the state itself. The corruption of the universal incarnation of a given polity itself. Its internal corruption gives rise to the corruption of the individual. Let me put it this way. Every form of corruption also bears witness to a corruption of philosophy. It's not just that what they're doing is corrupt. They have a corrupt philosophy. They have a corrupt worldview. They have a corrupt understanding of statehood. But there's a specific discontinuity that I wanted to make the highlight of today's lecture. Make the specific highlight of today's lecture. And it's the discontinuity that is between how the Bolshevik state, how the Soviet state, I should rather say, legitimated itself. Because on the one hand, let me just very clearly point out this fact, right? Okay. Hello. 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 I'm going to give you 30 seconds. 30, 29, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're not wasting time. I'm not wasting any fucking time. You get in my fucking VC, then fix your fucking mic and make sure it works. Instead of wasting all of our fucking time. You've been sitting there for an hour, but you didn't think to make sure your shit worked before fucking wasting my time. Most disrespectful shit you can do. Fucking idiot. Anyway, the specific discontinuity is between the October Revolution, between the Provisional Government and the October Revolution. That's the discontinuity. Now, first I want to discount this idea that just because we ideologically discover some truth that the bourgeois state is condemned and it's illegitimate and it merely serves the interests of the capitalist class and yada, 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 that this alone is enough to anarchistically have a coup or just destroy whatever. This is nonsense, right? So this is what MLs on Twitter believe, who are adopting the anarchistic worldview, which is basically that the discoveries of my individual consciousness are enough to basically establish a total rupture and discontinuity between the existing form of the state and the one that I imagine is more legitimate, okay? So let's be clear. The Bolsheviks did not seize power because they had a vision of society that they wanted to conform society to and implement. Communists don't advocate for a violent revolution just to seize power in order to, implement their specific will. I will explain to you what happened. And I tried to do this a few days ago, but I was so tired. I was took too really long. I'm going to really shorten it and simplify it for you, okay? So they had what you call the February Revolution of 1917. There was widespread civil unrest, widespread discontent, and the basic sentiment on the street was that the Russian people were basically dissatisfied with the war. They were dissatisfied with breadlines. The peasants were hungry for land. There was all sorts of social factors that culminated in what actually happened. And the main demand, I would say, of the revolution was basically one: give us some kind of constitutional state instead of a czarist autocracy That was the main demand behind it, right? The second one was pull out of the war immediately, right? Give us a constitutional state and pull out of the fucking war, okay? So they basically appointed existing members of the Duma that had existed at the time, and for the whole year of 1917, there was no convocation of any constituent assembly. There was no election that happened to legitimate the new government. So the question of the legitimacy of the state is basically being reared. It's rearing its head. Now, how do you legitimize a state? Now, from the standard liberal conception of politics, this is how you're going to do it, right? You're going to hold a new election, and you're going to allow the will of the people to exercise its will, right? And then that new government will have been legitimated by an election, and we're happy now, right? That's a democratic government. That's the liberal conception of the state, right? So in the meantime, I'm just summing up what I already explained to you before, but in the meantime, while everybody was waiting for the convocation of this new constituent assembly, there arose across the Russian country and in the cities Soviets. Soviets were these councils, right? These like city councils, right? Let's just think of it that way, I guess, which basically attended to the day-to-day lives of people in the meantime. You didn't have a functioning government, really, so they were going to establish these Soviets to bypass the political bureaucracy that already existed, to basically defend and safeguard the revolution while everybody was waiting for a constituent assembly that's going to create some kind of parliamentary democratic republic of some kind, right? And that's what the Soviets were. So those had already arisen. Now Lenin, in his April thesis, basically comes to the conclusion that the Soviets already represent the skeleton of a new form of democratic government. Now, so from the very outset, right, Lenin is not here proposing his own ideal government. One already exists, according to Lenin. It's the Soviets. The Soviets are the key, right? So already we don't have anything in common with anarchist or fascist volunteerism because the seeds of the thing are already there in reality, right? That's important to keep in mind. Now, the October Revolution happens under the slogan, all power to the Soviets, to establish a Soviet government, okay? But the question of the role of the Bolshevik Party is still not very clear. We want to establish a Soviet constitution and a Soviet government to give all power to the Soviets, and then this is what the anarchists and ultra-left to say, but you lied because it was actually the Bolsheviks who were in charge. It was the dictatorship of the Bolsheviks. More like all power to the Bolsheviks. Right? That's pretty much what they say. So, if it was just the Soviet government, there wouldn't be a dictatorship, right? It's the Bolshevik party, the party that represents the dictatorship part of the whole thing. It's the party that represents the dictatorship, right? The part of the dictatorship. So how do we reconcile ourselves with that, right? How do we reconcile ourselves with that fact? Were the Bolsheviks, in fact, lying when they said all power to the Soviets? They really meant all power to the Bolshevik Party? Well, what you first have to establish and understand is that the Bolshevik Party represented in its most organized form the incarnation of the universal interests of the Russian proletariat. Just like it had before it seized power. And this is not only because the overwhelming majority of the urban proletariat was in favor of the Bolsheviks. That alone wouldn't even be enough. It's also because of the fact that what the Bolsheviks stood for in terms not only of their program, but even in terms of the form of their organization and their political form, corresponded to the reality of the proletarian class. In reality, it was the party of the proletariat. Even if not a single proletarian supported them, it was. Now that sounds like an absurd thing to say, right? It sounds like an absurd thing to say. But this would neglect the fact that within the various sphere of conflicting views and understandings of the revolutionary situation at the time, which preceded the Bolsheviks, right? Between the Mensheviks and the socialist revolutionaries and the various other forces, it was the Bolsheviks alone who represented something like a proletarian interest. This is not the existing short-term interests of the factory proletariat that had existed within the Russian Empire at the time. This is the interests of that class which has nothing to sell but its own labor. Which means there is something inherently anticipatory about proletarian consciousness. Rather than deriving this is idealism, you are mentally fucking retarded. You are mentally fucking retarded. Stupid fuck, stupid Anglo metaphysics, stupid bitch. Looks at something that fucking goes beyond the bounds of their fucking narrow understanding of Marxism and their empiricism, their empiricist shit, and they call it fucking idealism, you stupid bitch. This is idealism. This is idealism. How is it fucking idealism, you dumb fuck? How is it idealism to recognize that material reality does not only lie in the sum total of empirically tangible individuals and the commingling of their interests, which is coincidental and arbitrary from a fucking empiricist perspective? You stupid fuck. This is idealism. The proletarian class refers to a specific relationship to production. The reality of that relationship does not only exist in the form of those individuals whose lives have come to be defined and constituted by that relation. The relation precedes the individual. Because in Marxism, the relation has a primary and causal status in regards to the individual, the relation is what's primary. If you don't understand that, you are not a fucking Marxist, you're an empiricist retard. The question of how this relation can prove itself is a different question. But what we are arguing about right now is the chicken and the egg. What comes first? What comes first? If we ask the question of what comes first, it becomes obvious to us that from a Marxist perspective, the idea that the interests of the class represent some phenomenally distinct strata is a wrong view. There's a discontinuity between those two things because the phenomenal distinction arises only as a result of the relation. The relation is what's primary because the relation is a universal relation. So we are talking about the very essence of the genesis of social forms. Ask a simple question. Where is the proletariat in the United States right now? Where's the proletariat? What most dumb fucks do is they set up an arbitrary definition of proletarian, and then whoever fits that definition is a proletariat, right? The opposite of the Marxist view. No, it's clear that the proletariat, specific to Marx, is seemingly missing in a country like the United States. That proletariat isn't here. And no, it's not just that it's taken new form. It's like there's no distinct proletariat in the United States. Proletarianness as a class interest can only be discerned at the level of a specific political relation. The proletarian class is real, it just doesn't seem like it exists anywhere. The proletariat is the cause of these various different social formations, but it doesn't seem like it is just anywhere that exists somewhere. Like, oh, that is the proletariat. Every time you get a group of people in the United States say that is the proletariat, even according to your own definition of proletariat, there's going to be so many contradictions. Especially today. Everyone is somehow not. Even factory workers. Somehow it's not simply as it was in Marx's time.
They exist, you are not allowed to acknowledge them. Does Zero understand?
I know he does. He does acknowledge the working class, I agree, but the proletariat, that class, as a universal class interest, it's very hard to find a group of people and say that is the proletariat. Which means the relation has to be somehow precedent to the phenomenal form in reality. The relation somehow possesses precedence over the phenomenal form.
U.S. democracy.
Proletarianness is dissolved in all these different phenomenal and cultural relations, which makes it hard to pinpoint a proletariat. So we can only recognize a proletariat in the relation. And the implications of the recognition of the proletariat, of the relation thereof, for our common social reality. What is the meaning of Bolshevik dictatorship? Let's continue the story. The Bolsheviks promised to not get in the way of the convocation of the Constituent Assembly election. However, they did say that the binding effects of the Constituent Assembly's election will be dependent on the mood of the country. Lenin's word, the mood of the country. Already, Lenin does not defer to the prior forms as the essence, as a liberal would. He doesn't say this is the sacred form by which a people exercises their will. He refers to something called mood. Not the sacred law of democracy, but the mood. The mood of the country, as it happens, was that no one gave a fuck about the Constituent Assembly elections because they did not adequately reflect the realities of the people. I pointed out before how, for example, the Socialist Revolutionary Party, which everyone knew was going to win, split in November in the lead up to these elections on the 27th between left and right, and it was elected as one party because it registered itself on the ballot in October before the split. So Chernov was placed the head of the Constituent Assembly, the Speaker of the Constituent Assembly. In the meantime, the Bolsheviks were forming a government with the left SRs, respecting the fact that the left SRs were already immensely popular among the people. However, so disbanding the Constituent Assembly, as many claim, was a Bolshevik coup is simply not true. The Bolsheviks got into power by saying all power to the Soviets. As a matter of fact, they did form a constitution in January, and they did create a Soviet government. But the question stands is, why didn't the Bolshevik measures and decisions, why were these not the result of Soviet democracy, but rather the result of the party dictatorship and the inner decisions taken by the party? Give me a moment. Give me a moment. All right. Party dictatorship and the form of sovereignty that party dictatorship represents is neither a whimsical dictatorship of individuals over the rest of the country, nor does it simply represent some kind of direct democracy, grassroots, whatever. Party dictatorship articulates the universal rationale of the whole of the society within a definite form. That is what a party is about. A party realizes the universality of the whole of society within a definite form. This form being, yes, exclusive to members of the party. But by being a member of the party, you have already committed yourself to being a fighter, for example, of the proletarian class. And since the proletariat only epitomizes a specific universality of the whole people in a specific way, then effectively, and this is what it has come to mean in countries like China today, to be a member of the Communist Party means to be one who has resigned themselves and committed themselves to serving the whole people. It's not simply that the people don't know what they want. The question is about what form do the interests of the whole people take? Do the interests of the people magically arise in the confused and disparate expressions of will by several individuals? No, because as we see within bourgeois democracies, like the United States and within the West, Every single one of these individual votes and individual choices that we make are somehow overdetermined by universal social forms. We don't act on behalf of some individual interest. We participate in some kind of universal social conflict, which Marxism describes as the class struggle. And I'll make this really simple for you in a country like the United States. When you vote Republican, are you voting for your individuality? When you vote Democrat, are you voting for your own individuality? No, you're taking a side in a clearly social, universal struggle. If liberalism was correct, then there would be as many parties as there are individual wills. There aren't. There's clearly a class struggle at hand, right? It's our inability to cognize and recognize class struggle as a function of state power. That's why we're on the cusp of a civil war right now. This is why China won't have a civil war and we might. Because we are still pretending like we are all just individuals with conflicting wills, and that Republicans are just people whose individual interests magically coincide, and Democrats are all people whose individual... No, it's not true. There's clearly a conflict at the heart of our country, right? It's like there's two different Americas, right? It's our inability to recognize that it's the reason for the political turmoil, right? China recognizes that. It's ingrained in the form of their state. They recognize not only is politics not just a bunch of individuals' interests, there's also a social antagonism at the heart of the universal political interest of the country. That is why there has to be a dictatorship. There needs to be a dictatorship to give determinate and singular expression to the interests of the whole society. If there is a single interest of society, if we are one society and one people with one interest, the reason you need a dictatorship is because that interest is undercut by an internal antagonism. If it were simply the case that there were no antagonism, there would be no need for a dictatorship. Our common interest would just magically arise somehow, without any discontinuity between our activity in life and the form of its representation. But alas, there is an antagonism. There is an antagonism there. And dictatorship does not mean arbitrary exercise of individual power over others where no one has rights. No, as a matter of fact, within the Chinese and Soviet state, you do have all of the formal rights that you have in a bourgeois society. You have all of the formal civil liberties and all of the formal rights you have. But that is not where sovereignty is. That is not where the power is. It's also not where the power is in bourgeois society either, by the way, because we're ruled by a deep state and we're ruled by the CIA. They don't fucking have to, they're above the law. So it's not accountable to us. But the difference between the CIA and the American deep state and the Chinese Communist Party is that it's not like we can join the CIA and participate in some common discourse about the future of our society. We can't. But in China, you can participate in what the party does, right? The party has debates, they have discussions about it's all open to the public, right? The public knows about it. You can participate in it. It's not secret, right? You can deal with that. So that's the difference. Give me a moment. Bolshevik political dictatorship was not something that came at the expense of Soviet power. The dictatorship of the party is what activated the possibility of Soviet power. Soviet power could not defend itself on its own foundation. Soviet power was constantly under threat and under siege by antagonistic class elements in a way that wasn't possible within the internal logic of the Bolshevik party. Now, to be clear, there were antagonistic elements and foreign powers that infiltrated the Bolshevik party. But at the very least, those people are subjected to a level of discipline and accountability to a common iron dictatorial will that would mean even if you're infiltrating the Bolshevik party from within, you still have to submit to its laws in a way that makes it very hard to just usurp and overthrow them. Stalin was not some charismatic, bombastic guy who took power. Stalin literally represented the impersonality of the party. Stalin was a bookkeeper. He was a note taker. Stalin was like just some middleman in the party, right? He wasn't some bombastic personality. He was banal. That's why Stalin was the symbol of power. The very internal logic of the party itself safeguarded Soviet power in a way that Soviet power alone could not do. So the question I want to leave you guys with before we move on, and I'm going to cap, I think I did want to talk about the cult of personality. I did want to talk about the cult of personality. No, I'm gonna talk about a few more things, right? The question I want to leave you with before I get to the one last thing is this. Why does a true democracy need the dictatorial party form? The party bureaucracy. America needs a party form. Because, and it has one. It's in the form of what Moldbug calls the cathedral. It's this bureaucracy of professional managerials and all these type of people who are not enshrined in our constitution anywhere, but seem to have all of this power over our lives and over the direction and course of our country. Except this is a fascist party, not a proletarian one that represents our interests. So instead of looking out for our interests like the Chinese Communist Party does, this one conspires against us and works to destroy us and our families. Finally, I want to mention this part as well. That is not to say party dictatorship is in and of itself a good thing. Stalin, I don't know if you know this, Stalin spent his whole political career, his whole leadership, trying to strengthen the Soviet state and the power of Soviet government at the expense of the party. Stalin wanted the party out of government. He still wanted a one-party state, as Grover first said, but Stalin wanted the rulers of the society to be people chosen by the Soviet democracy. Not these party functionaries who are appointed internally by the party. He wanted the rulership to be, yes, reserved for party members, but that means they have to compete in elections to get elected. So Stalin was trying to democratize the Soviet state. Which is why he was denounced by Khrushchev. party dictatorship was necessary at the infancy of the Soviet state to protect it. But the difference with fascism is that this party dictatorship existed to defer power to the people continually, which is what Stalin continually was doing bit by bit, to create a mature Soviet state of the whole people, which was safeguarded from antagonistic elements and foreign elements, at the expense of the party bosses and the party functionaries, these gatekeeping parasites who eventually conspired to usurp the power of the proletarian dictatorship. The origin of the state is Platonic by nature. It can only arise according to a singular and universal will. But this will must then prove itself by filling the content of its character with the character of the whole people. That was the sincere aim of Stalin and Mao. They were dictators, not against the people, but against the functionaries of party dictatorship that resided below them. Hmm. Huh. I'm just sorry. I just got lost in remembering some stuff. I think I'm gonna leave you with that today. But before we're gonna do GTRP, but for the lecture. I'm just not quite satisfied. Feel like I missed a lot. Feel like I missed a little bit. Um, because it's the specific. Here's what I feel like I missed explaining, which was the delay. Why did it not begin as Soviet democracy? Why begin as party dictatorship? Why begin? But I think this is also because the beginning in question is also the beginning of modernity more generally. It's true that just on the face of it, Bolshevik dictatorship seems indistinguishable from an anarchistic, bourgeois, modern dictatorship that completely wipes out all precedent forms of statehood and reality of the people and just appears whimsical. But I think the alternate modernity of Soviet communism represents how it appeared this way indeterminate, negation, only to clear the way and give rise for a new expression of what is truly authentic within the Russian people. A new precedent of statehood, a new civilization, as Lenin put it. But why must it begin like from this? Begin from this because of the disaster of modernity. Let's put it this way. The communist dictatorship, the Bolshevik dictatorship, was a dictatorship that from the beginning, and by its own inner nature, resigned itself to its own dissolution, resigned itself to its own, rather, I should say, imperilement in the broad strata of the people and civil society. First, the bloody dictatorship, and then it resigns itself to the people. To give it content. It's an inner jihad of modernity. I hope for some of you this lecture has clarified some things. I'm not quite satisfied with it. However, I haven't even finished my book on this, so maybe that's why. But I do think there's things I left out. I do feel I've left some things out. I feel like I've left out some crucial things. I think the main takeaway of these dictatorships, whether Chinese or Soviet, these are people who stood up and decided, ethically speaking, to confront the universal dilemma of modernity headfirst on their own terms. Because the alternative is to be a slave of modern Europe. In a microcosm, they repeated the disaster of European modernity, rather than be on their knees as slaves to the occult masters in modern Europe of this modernity. They repeat modernity on their own, in their own way, according to their own logos.